Reactions continue to flood in as people process the over 800-page first volume of the state capture report. Numerous high-profile politicians and business people have been implicated in the report. Let's speak to General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions, Zwelinzima Vavi, who has been on the record pleading with former President Jacob Zuma to fix South Africa, but nothing happened. Mr. Vavi joins me now for that conversation. So we have part one of three, Mr. Vavi. I wonder how much of it have you read, and the parts that you have read, what jumps out for you?
Well, the extent of the rot in our country goes very, very deep than most of us can imagine. The damage was massive. The cost will be counted by many generations to come, not only to the economic impact, but also just to the political fiber of our society, the morality that we once boasted about, and many, many things that are associated with it. And that's why, from the SAFTU perspective, we've welcomed the presentation of the report warmly. We are excited that finally there is something to talk about that has gone through 4 years of interrogation, discussions, gathering of evidence, to the point that we now have recommendations as to who must be prosecuted, for what specifically, concretely, and there are further recommendations on who must be investigated, for what specifically. We want to urge a speedy prosecution of all of the people that are involved in the pillaging of the resources, in the pillaging of the political morality of our country, and without any further delay. In fact, we worried when President says he will only start acting in June after he would have submitted the report to Parliament. And having said that, we want to also warn that there's going to be a reaction. The beneficiaries of this pillaging, of this corruption, of this ill-forgotten wealth are not going to take this report lying down. They are already mobilizing. They are going to be using social media. They are going to use left-wing rhetoric, including quoting Marxism, Leninism, this and this communist literature, in order to confuse and to justify a project which essentially was about undermining the prospects of our country to prosper, undermining the right of our workers to a better life for all. And we want to make a call to workers: don't be fooled, and stand behind the truth. In this particular instance, it can never be in the interest of any worker to defend acts of corruption, because corruption essentially will always be a project of the elite to undermine the collective interest of the many.
Speaking of that, then, some of the rhetoric that you do see, Bladen Zimande was speaking a short while ago and saying, let's not only focus on the corruption as perpetrated by actors in the public service. Actually, I think he makes a good point there, because the report, this first part of the report, does reveal a lot of collusion in corruption by actors in the private sector as well. How important is it that the message filters through that the accountability must cut across, not only seeing people that were in the civil service, for instance, at SARS being charged, but also people to the extent that people did wrong. I saw the name of Nedbank, for example, being mentioned in relation to Regiment's Capital, that whole deal that happened at SAA and Bain Capital, just to name a few.
Look, in our country, precisely because sometimes of the role of a media owned by corporates, there's always a bias towards emphasis on corruption as being a problem in the public sector only. Whereas in any capitalist system, the driver of corruption actually is the greed that is openly promoted as a way of surviving. this whole notion of me first, promoted by the capitalist system and to hell with everybody else, is something that drives this new morality that have unfortunately moved from the private sector to the ANC, to the trade unions, to the religious organizations. Everywhere now we are facing a crisis. If Comrade Zwelinzima was to be honest himself, he will subject himself to a lifestyle audit, because he too have had to face countless allegations about what is happening in the cities in the country. How I wish that one day you will say, I as a communist is prepared to be the first one in the row as we implement from March going forward the law that says all politicians together with the public service must be subjected to a lifestyle audit. And I will then believe him, because unlike me, you still have to come in public and say, sorry, South Africa, that I colluded with this project between 2005 and 2007, and that it produced a presidency of Jacob Zuma, which is not the only one, but which is actually one of the key moments that makes South Africa to find itself where it is today. You still have to make that public apology so that we can believe that when he says that we must fight corruption, it will be from somebody who have really crossed that Damascus.
In fact, that leads me to another point of debate, Mr. Vavi, the extent to which the framing of the events we are seeing now, the conclusion of the work of the Zondo Commission, has been framed in such a way as to say that, you know, there was a period of state capture and sort of an assurance that says that period has passed. Has it, in your view?
Not at all. Not at all. Look, from our perspective, the state capture and the biggest of it all was actually not even the terms of reference that Zondo have had to look at. The real capture happened, in our view, in the run-up to 1994, when the top of the ANC leadership appeared to have cut secret deals with big capital behind our backs and above our heads, to abandon the radical demands of the Freedom Charter that says the wealth of the country shall be shared amongst our people. When that was abandoned and instead the leadership embraced the normative economic program of the National Party, adopted by the National Party in the run-up to 1994, then we knew that the capture had happened. That capture have not yet been looked at more specifically. It's a political capture to divert a liberation movement away from its historic mission into a mission that have led to a situation where South Africa finds itself as the most unequal society on earth, as the country that is the face of unemployment, worst unemployment amongst industrializing economies in the whole world, worst youth unemployment in the entire world, where the gaps between the rich and the poor have continued to widen. We believe that that's a real capture. Nevertheless, we do not believe to the school of thought, in particular associated with the RET forces, that says because there was a capture, because there was a corruption during the apartheid rule and the National Party, we must now use the morality of the National Party to judge our leaders against that bankruptcy. No. We believe that the people who must be judged even harshly are the people that are the liberators, the people that went out of their way to convince all of us that our struggle against apartheid and colonialism was a struggle for justice. And you cannot tell us now that, no, that struggle must be compared with the system that was declared as evil and evil against society.
Lastly, Mr. Vavi, to the extent that there are those who believe that corruption is a victimless crime, you're merely diverting funds from a state that has perhaps, deep pockets, and, you're stealing $1 million there, 100,000 there, 200,000 there, and you're really not harming anyone. I was thinking about the case of SA Express, which has been in provisional liquidation, and some of what has been found therein in the first part of the report. But I'm sure you are able to talk to a bit more. What would you say to those who believe that you can't even show us who are the victims, who was prejudiced by any of these activities that are being labeled state capture?
Let me count a few. It's not just SA Express. It is SAA itself. It is Dinel, whose workers went to holiday without a single cent in wages despite working. It is PRASA that have collapsed totally, the railway network system that have been completely removed to the point that 80% of workers today are using taxis. It is every state enterprises, the ESCOM of this world, which have now seen electricity rising by hundreds. When we used to offer the cheapest electricity in the world, we now have an institution that is owing 450 billion rands to everybody, including to the workers. How could anybody call himself a revolutionary and yet defend a program of the elite to rob the working class children and the working class, the poorest, the marginalized, a possibility of taking themselves out of what apartheid and colonialism have placed them? It can't be a revolutionary that does that. It is actually a counter-revolutionary that is using the left-wing rhetoric in order to justify stealing and robbing of the future of the children of the working class themselves.
Mr. Zwelinzima Vavi, thank you for your time and your insights. He is the General Secretary of SAFTU, the South African Federation of Trade Unions, reacting there to the first of three parts of the State Capture Commission's report. He was talking to me there.